no, it can't be. Well, you know what? The calendar tells us. The calendar tells us. The shop tells us. The education system tells us. The warmer weather yesterday tells us that Easter is coming. And I think for many, it's just a date in a calendar, a date that the calendar counts down to, the dates that the shops work towards, the date that the education system works around, and the warmer weather, oh please, is coming soon. But you know what? With the busyness of work, with the joy of the fact that there's a bank holiday weekend so we get some extra rest, I think for many it would be easy for Easter to pass by and to not really realise that it had actually happened. The calendars, the shops, the education system, the warmer weather would tell us that Easter had come and gone. But I think it is possible that if we don't intentionally pause, if we don't intentionally take time to meditate and to think upon the things that Jesus has done for us, Easter could pass us by without us stopping to give thanks, without us taking time to be in awe and wonder of all that Jesus has done for us. I think it's very possible. So this morning, I'm inviting you with me to, as we think over these next few weeks, to not allow Easter just to slip by without celebration of who Jesus is and all that Jesus has done for us, to not allow Easter to slip by without time to meditate on the wonder of it all as we sang this morning. Oh, because Easter and all it means is just so important for each one of us. It's a foundation to which we build our lives upon, because Jesus came and he died for you and he died for me. I've lost my notes already. He died for you and he died for me in order that we may be made right with God, in order that we would know that our sins are forgiven, in order that we can have eternal life with him and know what it is to live for him each and every day. Oh, the wonder of it all, that the King would leave his throne. Jesus would leave heaven and come to earth. Why? Because he loved us. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and his only son. That's why Jesus walked this earth. That's why that he walked the way of suffering, that he suffered and he died for you and for me. And this morning we're going to open our Bibles and actually, don't be shocked when I say we're going to actually look over 2 chapters. I couldn't decide where we were going to sit, so we're going to do 2 chapters this morning, people. So it's time for you this week to maybe spend some time reading these scriptures so that you get the fullness of all that occurred in the lead up to Jesus' death. I want us this morning to journey to the cross together, to take a moment to marvel and to wonder at all that Jesus has done for us. In Matthew chapter 26 and verse 2, Jesus' death approaches, and he's been in Matthew's gospel. Matthew records all the teachings that Jesus is giving, and then he comes to the point as we hit chapter 26, and Jesus says to his disciples, as you know, the Passover is 2 days away. The Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. He tells the disciples something they knew. Passover was coming. Just like we know Easter was coming, they knew that Passover was coming. They knew when it was. It was something they would have celebrated since they were young. They were aware of this fact that Passover was coming, and it was coming soon. And then Jesus tells them this. He links these 2 things together. He says, Passover's coming, that thing that they were certain of, the thing that they were sure of would happen, because it happened every year in the calendar. Passover is coming in 2 days, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified. He tells them that this is about to happen with certainty. They'd yet to really comprehend this. They'd yet to really grasp this. But yet he reminds them of the things that he's been saying to them, the things that he's been preparing them for, that there's going to come a time when he's no longer with them, that he will die. And he speaks to them quite plainly here, saying he's going to be crucified. And as we read, Matthew makes the point that actually time is short because the chief priests and the elders have already made a decision. They've already began to plot and to scheme in order to get Jesus arrested and killed. Things were already in motion. And Jesus knows this. He knows that he's going to die. And he's preparing his disciples for that to happen. Matthew then jumps and draws our attention to the events in Bethany and what followed after that, to the actions of a woman who expressed her extravagant love and devotion to Jesus, as she takes an alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume and pours it on Jesus. As she takes what is costly, what cost her something, and gives it to him, pours it out, pours it upon him. A costly gift, a freely given, freely poured out. Yet in a room that would have smelled of sweets, the sweet aroma of this perfume as she pours it out upon Jesus. In this act of love and devotion, there were those who would criticize. There was those who would say, is this not waste? Is this not wasteful? Yet Jesus reminds them that he's not always going to be with them. And he says of this act that she does, he says, when she poured out this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. There he is speaking to them again about what's about to happen. This act, this woman, this act of pouring perfume upon him was, he said, preparing him for burial. How fitting that a woman who freely gave what was costly, an extravagant act of love and devotion, that she would give this to Jesus. Jesus, who was about to die, who would freely give not expensive perfume, but would freely give his life, not just for one, but for all, for the many, for all, taking upon himself the sin of all humankind, that all may be forgiven. The most extravagant love ever seen as Jesus dies upon the cross for us. Matthew then contrasts this with what happens next. Judas' betrayal of Jesus in verses 14 and 15. And it says, then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. We're not sure what quite triggered Judas to make this move, to make this choice. But in John's gospel, John tells us that Judas was a thief, that in fact, that he was in charge of the money bag and he had been helping himself to what was in there. Could it have been that as he saw this extravagant gift of this expensive perfume poured out, as he saw it and thought, oh, what a waste, that something in that caused him to go, no, to turn his back on Jesus. Jesus who would allow this gift from this woman, this gift of love, devotion, of worship to him, a gift that Judas would have probably been with those who said, what a waste. How different their responses were. How different the responses of this woman and of this man. How different were the responses of this woman and Judas. Has Jesus prepared to die? Has they prepared for what was happening or going to happen next? One gave something costly, an act of love and devotion to Jesus. The other was readily willing to betray Jesus, giving him over to the religious leaders for just a bag of silver. Matthew then moves us back to the events leading up to the crucifixion. Is a journey that Jesus takes to the cross. And as we see this journey, as we approach Easter for ourselves, what is our response to Jesus? How is it that we will respond? Will we take time to worship with love and devotion like this woman did? Will we take time to give him what was costly, to sacrifice for him? Or like Judas, will we turn our backs upon him? Will we rush on by, concerned more with our own needs and our own desires, rather than pausing to wonder, to worship him, to give our all to him? Matthew's account invites us, as it carries on, to meditate on the gravity of these somber events. It invites us to consider all that has occurred as Jesus journeys towards the cross. So this morning, would you journey with me? Would you look again with me? Would maybe as you go home, would you read these chapters in Matthew chapter 26 and 27? And as I said before, to meditate and to journey and to be in awe of all that Jesus has done. As Jesus moves back to the events leading up to the crucifixion, we see that the disciples are inquiring of Jesus about the Passover and where they should make preparations so they can all eat. Jesus knew what was coming. He knew of Judas' betrayal. He knew that he would suffer. He knew that he was about to die. Yet, as I read these events, I can't but help smile that he took the opportunity in the midst of what must have been a mixture of emotions, as he knew what was coming. He took the opportunity to pull his disciples in close. He ate with them. He spent time with them. He took time to teach them something new, to give new meaning to something that they would have done before. Because as they ate together, rather than the normal ritual, Jesus shares new meaning. He brings new words, new understanding as he breaks the bread and takes the cup. As he tells them that this is my body that is broken. This is my blood that is shed. It's a new covenant. It's forgiveness. Knowing that he would endure suffering, Jesus takes time as he shares this meal with his disciples to give thanks. To give thanks. Sometimes as I was pondering upon this, I was like, wow, when I'm in a place of suffering myself, although it's nothing compared to what Jesus does, how difficult sometimes do I find it to give thanks? And there is Jesus showing us how it is that we should deal with moments of suffering, moments of grief, moments of knowing what's coming. And the expectation of all of that would be that Jesus takes time to give thanks. Knowing that his death was imminent, we read that they sung a hymn. They sung a hymn together. A hymn of worship, a hymn of praise. Jesus would have been part of that. Knowing that his death was imminent, he still raised his voice in worship and adoration to his Father. Then filled with sorrow and deeply distressed, Jesus goes to the garden and he prays. My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Verse 39. Yet not as I will, but as you will. Returning to his disciples, he finds them sleeping. Can you imagine the sting of disappointment of those that you've asked to keep watch with you as you move a little bit further to pray? The sting of disappointment as he goes back and discovers that they are asleep. Even though he had expressed to them his sorrow and his agony, they were asleep. The disappointment. And again, he moves. And he goes back and comes to this prayer of surrender. My Father, if it's possible for this cup to be taken away, my Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done. Again, there he is praying, may your will be done. Verse 42, may your will be done. As he had taught his disciples to pray, earlier in Matthew's gospel, we see it. Your will be done. He taught them to pray that. Here he is showing that he himself is also praying as he prays to the Father, your will be done. He knows what is expected. It's not long before his betrayer arrives. Judas arrives and Jesus is arrested. He's abandoned by all of his friends. All the disciples deserted him and left, we read. He's then taken to listen to allegations against him. The truth he spoke, they claimed, was blasphemy. They spat upon his face. They struck him with their fists. They slapped him while they mocked him. His close friend outside denied that he even knew him. Then bound, they led him away, handed him over to Pilate, the governor. Innocent of any wrongdoing, they treated him like a criminal. Silent, he stood before those who would accuse him. Then there is the decision of what will happen next. What will happen next? And we see him rejected, Jesus rejected by the crowd. Crowds once listened to him in masses. They once came to be healed by him. They witnessed the miracles that he performed. But now the crowd shouted even louder, crucify him. Next, the pain of the leather straps, the leather whip of these strands hit his body as they flogged him before handing him over to be crucified. But his suffering had yet to come to an end. Because again, we see and we read of his humiliation. They stripped him of his clothes, an act of humiliation. A scarlet robe was put upon him. A twisted crown of thorns was placed on his head. A staff in his hand as they mocked him. Again, they spat on him. They struck his head repeatedly. How the crown of thorns must have pierced his head with every strike. Finally, they led him away to be crucified. Disappointed, arrested, abandoned, accused, spat on, struck, slapped, mocked, denied, rejected, flogged, humiliated, mocked again, spat on, and struck. And we finally get to the place of his crucifixion. And let me read you these words in Matthew 27, verses 32 to 50. And as they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots, and sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the lands. And about 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cries out with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some who were standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling for Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got the sponge. They filled it with wine vinegar and put it on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. Jesus died for you and for me. He did this all for us. He went through the suffering, the pain, the agony of the cross, and all that led up to it, just for us. Only Jesus could have, fully God and yet fully man, the perfect sacrifice, the one who was without sin. He died upon the cross, taking upon himself the punishment for our sin. He died so that you and me could know forgiveness, so that we could know what it is to have a right relationship with God. Yet as Easter approaches, many will pass on by because it's just another date in the calendar. But what about you? What about you? What will your response be this Easter to the one who gave it all for you? Will you be like Judas and turn away? Or will you be like that woman with that alabaster jar, that jar of perfume, who came in worship, in love and devotion, and poured out that which cost her something? Will you give your life, your everything, your all to Jesus, the one who gave it all for you? What is your response this morning to this incredible gift of love? I wonder if we could bow our heads. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and take a moment just to respond to God for yourself. Oh, Jesus. If anybody here wants to, for the very first time, say yes to God, yes to this incredible gift of love, yes to the forgiveness that is offered, yes to being made right with God, take this moment to say yes to God. To say, God, would you come into my life? Would you come into my life? I believe in Jesus. I believe in that Jesus died and rose again for me. Forgive me of all the wrong that I've ever done. I choose to live for you, to follow you. To know the expectant hope of eternal life in you. Come into my life, I pray. Maybe you want to just take a moment to pray that if you've never done that.